Chapter 1. The blood-stained cobblestone. As the rain fell like a curse over Ashford, turning the cobblestones into mirrors that reflected nothing but darkness. Elena Thorne pulled her coat tighter, her breath misting in the frigid October air as she hurried through the narrow alley behind the theater. The performance had run late, a charity gala. She'd agreed to photograph only because the rent was 3 weeks overdue, and her pride had finally surrendered to necessity. She should have taken the main street. Everyone knew that after nightfall, the old quarter belonged to shadows and whispers, to things the city pretended didn't exist in daylight. But the main street meant passing the cafe where her ex-fiancé now worked, where he'd probably installed his new girlfriend behind the counter. Elena had once wiped down every morning, and some humiliations were worse than fear. The scream shattered the night like breaking glass. Elena froze, her camera bag sliding against her hip. The sound had come from deeper in the alley, where the gaslight didn't reach, where the old brick warehouses leaned against each other like drunk conspirators. Every instinct screamed at her to run the other way, to let someone else be the hero, to remember that she'd already used up her quota of bravery just getting out of bed this morning. But the scream came again, high, terrified, and unmistakably young. Elena's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over the emergency call button. She moved forward, each step a negotiation with her pounding heart. The alley opened into a small courtyard, where a broken fountain stood sentinel over generations of forgotten prayers. 3 figures surrounded a fourth. The men wore expensive suits that looked wrong in the dingy courtyard, their movements unnaturally fluid as they circled their prey. The fourth figure was small, a girl, no more than 8 or 9, pressed against the fountain's crumbling edge. Her white dress seemed to glow in the darkness, and her eyes were wide with terror that looked far older than her years. "Please," the child whispered, and something in her voice made Elena's skin prickle. "My father will. Your father is dying in the East Wing," one of the men interrupted, his voice carrying an accent Elena couldn't place. "House Corvin falls tonight, little princess. And you fall with it." The man reached for the girl, and Elena moved without thinking. "Stop." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself forward, phone held high like a weapon. "I've already called the police. They're 2 minutes away." It was a lie. She hadn't called anyone. But the men turned toward her, and Elena saw their faces clearly for the first time. Beautiful, inhumanly, terribly beautiful, with skin to pale, and eyes that reflected the streetlight like a cat's. The nearest one smiled, and his teeth were wrong to sharp, to many, designed for tearing rather than chewing. "How fortunate," he said softly. "Witnesses are such a complication, but fresh blood is always welcome." Elena's finger finally found the emergency button, but the man moved faster than sight, knocking the phone from her hand. It skittered across the wet cobblestones, screen cracking against the fountain's base. His hand closed around her throat, lifting her until her feet left the ground, and Elena clawed at his wrist uselessly. His skin felt like marble, cold and impossibly hard. "Weak little thing," he murmured, tilting his head as if examining a particularly boring specimen. "Shall we make it quick?" "Let her go, Theron." The new voice cut through the courtyard like a blade, and Elena felt the hand around her throat loosen slightly. A fourth man stood in the alley's entrance, rain streaming off his black coat. Unlike the others, he didn't move with predatory grace. He stood perfectly still, and somehow that stillness was more threatening than any show of speed. He was tall, dark-haired, with features that might have been carved from stone for all the emotion they showed. But his eyes pale gray in the gaslight fixed on Elena with an intensity that made her forget to breathe even after the hand released her throat. "Marcus Corvin," the man called Theron said, and Elena heard genuine surprise beneath the mockery. "I thought you'd be with your dying brother. Or has House Corvin already fractured so completely that you abandon your own blood?" "Release the child," Marcus said quietly. "And the woman. This is between our houses, not them. The child is Corvin," Theron countered. "Therefore, she's very much our concern. As for the woman," he glanced at Elena with casual cruelty. "She chose to interfere. That makes her fair game under the accords." Elena saw Marcus's jaw tighten, the first crack in his stone-carved composure. His gaze flicked to her, then to the small girl still pressed against the fountain. And something shifted in his expression, a calculation. A choice being made in real time. "I'll offer terms," Marcus said. "The girl and the woman unharmed and unmolested. In exchange for what?" Theron laughed. "You have nothing we want, Marcus. Your house is broken. Your brother dies tonight, your niece will follow, and you, he smiled. You'll watch it all burn. The attack came from 3 directions at once. Elena saw Marcus move, finally, and the stillness transformed into violence so swift and brutal that her mind struggled to process it. He caught the first attacker mid-leap, redirecting the momentum to send the man crashing through the fountain stone basin. The second he met with a strike to the throat that produced a sickening crack. The third slammed into Elena, driving her backward into the wall. Stars exploded across her vision, and she felt ribs crack under the impact. The man's hand tangled in her hair, yanking her head back to expose her throat, and she saw his mouth open impossibly wide. No. The small girl's scream carried a power that made the air itself shudder. The man holding Elena jerked backward as if struck, and Marcus was there, pulling Elena away from the wall and pushing her behind him in one smooth motion. The girl ran to them, her small hand clutching Elena's coat with desperate strength. How touching, Theron said, rising from where Marcus had thrown him. Blood too dark to be human stained his expensive suit. The great Marcus Corvin, playing hero for mortals. Your father would be ashamed. My father, Marcus said softly, dangerously, understood honor better than you ever will. He moved again, but this time Elena saw the purpose behind the violence. He wasn't trying to win, he was creating an opening. His hand closed around Elena's wrist, the girls around hers, and suddenly they were running. Marcus, pulling them through the maze of alleys with preternatural speed and precision. Behind them, Theron's laughter echoed off the brick walls, followed by words that made Marcus's grip tighten. Run, Corvin. But there's nowhere in this city we won't find you. And when we do, the mortal dies first. I want you to watch. They burst onto a wider street, where a black car waited with its engine running. Marcus shoved them both into the back seat, slamming the door before sliding behind the wheel. The tires screamed against wet pavement as they accelerated into the night. Elena sat in the darkness, her broken ribs grinding with each breath. The small girl pressed against her side, and watched the man who'd just saved her life grip the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Rain hammered against the windshield, and in the rearview mirror, his pale gray eyes met hers. I'm sorry, he said quietly, but your life just became far more complicated than you can possibly imagine. Chapter 2. Sanctuary in Shadows. The car's headlights carved tunnels through the rain as Marcus drove them deeper into the outskirts of Ashford, where the city's elegant facade crumbled into industrial decay. Elena pressed her hand against her ribs, each breath a sharp reminder that the last 10 minutes hadn't been a nightmare. The small girl beside her had gone utterly silent, her fingers still clutching Elena's coat with desperate strength. Where are you taking us? Elena's voice came out rougher than she intended, her throat still aching from Theron's grip. Somewhere safe, Marcus said, without taking his eyes from the road. Somewhere they won't think to look immediately. That's not an answer. His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the rhythmic thump of windshield wipers and the girl's shallow breathing. Elena studied the back of Marcus's head, the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the wheel, like he was holding on to control by force of will alone. Those men in the alley, they'd been impossibly fast, impossibly strong. The teeth, the marble-cold skin, the way they'd moved, like gravity was merely a suggestion. And Marcus had fought them like an equal. What are you? Elena whispered. The car swerved slightly, then steadied. In the rearview mirror, Marcus's pale gray eyes found hers again, and she saw something ancient and tired looking back. The same thing they are, he said quietly. The same thing my niece is. Elena looked down at the small girl pressed against her side. In the passing streetlights, the child's skin seemed to pale, her dark eyes to knowing. When she met Elena's gaze, there was no childish innocence, there only a grief that felt centuries old. Vampires, Elena said, testing the word on her tongue. It should have sounded ridiculous, like something from the paperback novels she'd photographed for book covers. Instead, it felt like naming something she'd always known lurked in the dark spaces of the world. Yes, the simple confirmation should have terrified her, should have sent her scrambling for the door handle. Consequences be damned. But Elena found herself thinking of the way Marcus had positioned himself between her and Theron, the way he'd pulled her away from the wall with a gentleness that contradicted his brutal efficiency, the way he'd said I'm sorry, like he actually meant it. Your brother, Elena said, remembering Theron's words. They said he was dying. Marcus's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Dorian was ambushed 3 nights ago. Silver poisoning. He has hours at most. And the girl your niece Syrah, Marcus interrupted softly. Her name is Syrah. She's Dorian's daughter. Elena looked down at the child again, seeing the resemblance now, the same dark hair, the same elegant bone structure. Syrah stared straight ahead, her small face composed in a way that no 8-year-old should be. What happens if your brother dies? Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer. House Corvin falls, Marcus said. The other houses divide our territory, our assets, our people. And Syrah, his voice caught, the first real crack in his composure. She becomes a ward of whichever house claims her. Or more likely, she disappears quietly. Children complicate succession. They'd kill a child, they'd call it mercy, Marcus said bitterly. A quick death rather than decades of political imprisonment. The vampire world has different ethics than yours, miss. He paused. I don't even know your name. Elena Thorne. Elena. He said it carefully, like he was committing it to memory. I'm Marcus Corvin, which you've gathered. And I'm sorry you were pulled into this. The car turned down a narrow road lined with abandoned warehouses, their broken windows like gouged eyes. Marcus pulled into a loading dock, killing the engine. The sudden silence felt oppressive. We'll stay here until dawn, Marcus said, already moving to open his door. They won't search this far out tonight. By sunrise, I'll have arranged safe passage for both of you. Wait, Elena caught his sleeve, then immediately regretted it when she felt the marble-hard muscle beneath the fabric. You're wounded. She'd noticed it when the streetlight had briefly illuminated the interior, a dark stain spreading across his side, too black to be human blood. Marcus glanced down at it with clinical detachment. Silver blade. I'll heal once I remove the fragments. Silver hurts you? Silver, sunlight, lack of blood. His mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. All the traditional weaknesses apply, more or less. Though we're harder to kill than the stories suggest. He climbed out of the car, moving with careful precision that suggested the wound hurt more than he'd admitted. Syrah followed silently, and Elena forced herself out despite her screaming ribs. The loading dock led into a vast empty warehouse that smelled of rust and old rain. Marcus produced a flashlight from somewhere, illuminating a space that had clearly been abandoned for years. Not exactly the Ritz, Elena muttered, but it has walls and a roof, Marcus said. Which is more than we had 10 minutes ago. He guided them to a corner office that still had intact windows and a door that locked from the inside. Someone had left furniture behind a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet. Marcus tested the desk's stability, then gestured for Syrah to sit. The girl finally released Elena's coat, climbing onto the desk with inhuman grace. She looked at Marcus with eyes that held too much understanding. Is Papa really dying? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus knelt before her, his face level with hers, and Elena saw his careful composure finally crack. He touched Syrah's cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from hands that had broken stone and bone minutes earlier. Yes, little one, he said softly, but he fought until the very end to protect you. That matters. Will you die too? Not if I can help it. Syrah studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, accepting the answer with a stoicism that broke Elena's heart. The girl lay down on the desk, curling into herself, and within moments her breathing had evened into sleep or something like it. Marcus rose, swaying slightly. The dark stain on his side had spread, and Elena saw his jaw clench against pain he refused to acknowledge. You need to deal with that wound, she said. I will. Once you're settled, I'm settled. I'm also not the one bleeding. Elena moved closer, professional instinct overriding fear. She'd photographed enough medical procedures for textbooks to recognize a serious injury. Sit down before you fall down. Marcus looked at her with something like surprise, then lowered himself into the remaining chair. His hands went to his shirt buttons, and Elena realized with a start that she was about to see exactly what lay beneath a vampire's elegant exterior. The silver needs to come out, Marcus said quietly. But I should warn you it won't be pleasant to watch. Elena pulled the other chair closer, her photographer's hands already steady despite everything. I once spent 6 hours documenting an emergency surgery for a medical journal. I can handle unpleasant, in the flashlight's harsh glow. Marcus's pale eyes studied her face, and Elena felt the weight of that ancient, tired gaze. You're either very brave or very foolish. Elena Thorne, he said. Probably both, she admitted. Now let me see the wound. Chapter 3. The price of immortal Timurk's shirt fell open, revealing a torso that looked carved from pale marble, every muscle defined with inhuman perfection. The wound cut across his ribs a ragged gash that wept blood so dark it appeared black in the flashlight's beam. But what made Elena's breath catch were the silver fragments embedded in the flesh, glowing faintly like dying embers. "I need tweezers or something similar," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the pain etched around his eyes. "The silver prevents healing. Each piece must be removed." Elena rummaged through her camera bag with shaking hands, finally producing the small toolkit she kept for equipment repairs. "Will these work?" Marcus took the needle nose pliers, testing their grip. "They'll do." He handed them back to her. "But I can't reach the deepest fragments. I'll need your help." "You want me to?" Elena stared at the wound, at the glowing silver buried in flesh that looked nothing like human tissue. "I'm not a doctor, no, but you have steady hands, and you're still here." Marcus met her gaze, and she saw genuine respect beneath the pain. "Most mortals would have run screaming by now, or fainted. You've done neither." "The night's still young," Elena muttered, but she took the pliers and knelt beside the chair. This close, she could see details that her mind had been trying to ignore: the way his skin held an impossible smoothness, the absence of normal human imperfections like pores or scars. Even wounded, he looked like a statue come to life. "Will this hurt you?" she asked. "Yes, but it needs to be done." Marcus braced his hands on the chair arms. "The silver burns. Every second it remains inside me, it spreads. Eventually, it would reach my heart." Elena positioned the flashlight to illuminate the wound, then carefully gripped the first visible fragment. The moment the pliers touched silver, Marcus went rigid, a sound escaping his throat that wasn't quite human. Elena froze. "Don't stop," he gritted out. Quickly is better than gently. She pulled, and the fragment came free with a wet sound that made her stomach turn. Marcus's hands had gouged deep impressions into the wooden chair arms. The wound where the silver had been immediately began to knit together, flesh regenerating before her eyes. "That's..." Elena stared, fascinated despite her revulsion. "You heal that fast?" "Normally, yes. Silver interferes with the process." Marcus's breathing had gone shallow. "There are 3 more pieces." Deeper, Elena found the second fragment, and extracted it with growing confidence, watching the flesh seal behind it. The third required digging slightly, and Marcus's entire body went taut, tendons standing out like cables beneath marble skin. She worked as quickly as she dared, and when the silver came free, he released a breath he'd been holding for far too long. "Last one," Elena said, but she couldn't see it clearly. "I think it's deeper than the others." "Near the ribs," Marcus confirmed. "You'll have to..." He stopped, jaw clenching. "You'll have to feel for it." Elena set down the pliers and pressed her fingers into the wound. The sensation was utterly wrong: cold flesh that felt more like clay than muscle, blood that was too thick, too dark. Her fingers found the fragment, sharp edges buried deep, and she worked it toward the surface while Marcus made sounds that would haunt her nightmares. Finally, she gripped it with the pliers and pulled. The fragment was larger than the others, jagged and cruel, and when it came free, Marcus sagged forward, his forehead nearly touching her shoulder. "Done," Elena whispered. "It's done." She watched the wound close, flesh knitting together until only dark blood remained as evidence of injury. Marcus stayed bent forward, his breathing gradually steadying, and Elena found herself aware of how close they were, close enough that she should have felt body heat, breath, the normal signs of life. Instead, there was only cold stillness and the faint smell of something ancient, like old libraries and crypts. "Thank you," Marcus said finally, lifting his head. His pale gray eyes were inches from hers. "That required trust. I won't forget it. You saved my life first," Elena said, pulling back and busying herself with cleaning the pliers. "Consider us even." "Hardly even." Marcus rose, testing his mobility. The wound had vanished completely, leaving only blood-stained skin. "You should never have been involved. I should have been faster, should have reached Sierra before Theron's people found her." "How did they find her?" "Betrayal, most likely." Marcus's voice went cold. "House Corvin has had many enemies, and apparently some allies who were merely waiting for the right moment to switch sides." He moved to the grimy window, peering out at the rain-soaked night. Elena studied his profile, the aristocratic features, the rigid posture that spoke of generations of breeding and discipline. He looked maybe 30, but his eyes held centuries. "How old are you?" The question escaped before she could stop it. 243 years. Marcus glanced back at her. I was turned during the French Revolution. A different world, a different life. Do you miss it? Being human? I barely remember it. He said it matter-of-factly, but Elena heard the loss beneath. The transition burns away most human memories. We retain knowledge, language, skills, but the emotional connections fade. I remember that I had a family, but not their faces. I know I loved someone once, but not her name. The revelation sent a chill through Elena that had nothing to do with the cold warehouse. That's horrible. That's the price of immortality. Marcus turned back to the window. We trade our humanity for endless time, and discover too late that time without connection is simply a longer way to be alone. Elena thought about his careful gentleness with Sierra, the way he'd positioned himself between her and danger without hesitation. You don't seem alone. You clearly love your niece. Sierra is different. She was born vampire, not made. Her mother was human, which means he stopped abruptly. Which means what? It means she'll retain her human memories, her capacity for connection, her ability to. Marcus trailed off, then continued in a different direction. Her mother died in childbirth. Dorian raised her alone, tried to give her both worlds. He wanted better for her than the endless political games and blood feuds that consume our kind. Is that why they're targeting her? Because she's different? Partly. Marcus's jaw tightened. But mostly because she's a threat to their plans. A child born of both worlds, raised to value human life. She represents change. The old houses prefer tradition. A sound from the desk made them both turn. Sierra had shifted in her sleep, small fingers twitching. Even unconscious, she looked troubled, and Elena felt a fierce protectiveness rise in her chest. This child, this strange, ancient child, had already lost her mother. Now her father was dying, and powerful forces wanted her dead simply for existing. What will you do? Elena asked. After dawn. I mean, where will you take her? Away from Ashford. Away from the houses and their wars. Marcus's voice held grim determination. There are places vampires can't easily reach. Remote areas, protected territories. I'll find one and keep her safe, even if it means permanent exile from my own kind. And me? You'll go back to your life. Marcus said it gently, but firmly. I'll provide enough money to relocate if you wish Theron saw your face, which means you're not safe in Ashford. But you'll forget this night eventually. Humans are remarkably good at rationalizing away the impossible. Elena touched her bruised throat, felt her cracked ribs shift with each breath. I don't think I'll be forgetting anytime soon. Perhaps not. Marcus studied her with that unsettling intensity. You're unusual, Elena Thorne. Most mortals who learn what we are either run or try to use the knowledge for gain. You've done neither. I'm too tired to run and too practical to try blackmailing something that could snap my neck without effort. Elena managed a weak smile. Besides, I know what it's like to have your whole world fall apart. To have people who should protect you turn into enemies instead. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, curiosity replacing the careful distance. Your engagement. Elena's smile faded. How did you mentioned avoiding a calf earlier. And you have a tan line where a ring used to be. His observation was clinical, but not unkind. Recent betrayal. Recent enough to still sting. 6 months ago, I caught my fiancé in our bed with my business partner. The words came out flat, drained of emotion through repetition. Lost the relationship, the business, and most of my friends in one spectacular implosion. Been rebuilding ever since. I'm sorry, don't be. Turns out he was embezzling from our accounts anyway. Elena shrugged, though it made her ribs scream. I got out before the legal mess got worse. Some betrayals are actually blessings in disguise. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, the world is full of monsters, Elena. Most of them are human, and some of them are vampires who kill children. Yes, Marcus agreed softly. Some are. The rain hammered harder against the windows, and in the distance, Elena heard the wail of sirens, police or ambulance, hunting through the night for their own emergencies. The normal world continuing on, unaware that in a forgotten warehouse, a mortal woman was being initiated into secrets that should have remained buried. Elena looked at Sierra's sleeping form, then at Marcus's watchful silhouette against the window. What happens at dawn? She asked. Marcus didn't turn around. At dawn, we discover whether Theron was bluffing about tracking us, whether my brother survived the night, whether the last remnants of House Corvin will stand with us or abandon a dying cause. That's a lot of uncertainty. Welcome to the vampire world, Marcus said. where the only certainty is that nothing stays buried forever. Chapter 4. Dawn's Fragile Promise. Rain had softened to a whisper by the time exhaustion finally claimed Elena. She'd tried to stay awake, hyper-aware of being trapped in an abandoned warehouse with two vampires, but her body had other plans. When she woke, pale gray light filtered through the dirty windows, and Marcus sat exactly where she'd last seen him, motionless by the window, watching the dawn break over Ashford's industrial wasteland. "You don't sleep," Elena said, her voice rough. Marcus turned slightly, acknowledging her without surprise. "Not the way humans do. We enter a dormant state during daylight hours, but it's not the same as true sleep. More like enforced stillness." "That sounds lonely." "It is." The admission came quietly, as if he hadn't meant to say it aloud. 2 centuries of conscious darkness. Your mind remains active, but your body refuses to obey. You lie there, thinking, remembering, regretting. Elena sat up carefully, her ribs protesting. She'd fallen asleep in the chair, and her neck had developed a spectacular crick. "Is that why you're still awake?" "Putting it off. I'm waiting for confirmation." Marcus held up a phone she hadn't noticed before, sleek, expensive, currently dark. "My people were supposed to contact me at dawn with news of Dorian's condition, and they haven't." No, the single word carried the weight of centuries. Sierra stirred on the desk, her small body uncurling with feline grace. Her dark eyes opened, fully alert, no trace of sleep fog that normal children showed. She looked at Marcus first, reading something in his expression that made her small face close down into careful blankness. "Papa?" she whispered. "I don't know yet, little one." Marcus crossed to her into strides, lifting her gently. "But whatever happens, you're safe. I promise you that." Sierra buried her face against his shoulder, and Elena saw the child finally crack small shoulders, shaking with silent sobs that seemed too controlled, too practiced. This wasn't the first loss she'd faced, Elena realized. Just the latest in a young life already scarred by vampire politics and violence. The phone buzzed. Marcus tensed, reading the message with an expression that revealed nothing. Then he set Sierra down gently and moved to the far corner of the office, his back to them both. His shoulders rose and fell, once the only outward sign of emotion, before he straightened and turned back. "Dorian passed an hour ago," he said, his voice perfectly level. "House Corvin is officially dissolved. The council has declared all former territories open for acquisition." Sierra made a sound like a wounded animal. Elena moved without thinking, pulling the child against her side despite her screaming ribs. The girl felt impossibly cold, her small body rigid with grief she'd been trained to contain. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered, stroking Sierra's hair. "I'm so sorry." Marcus remained across the room, his face carved from ice. But Elena saw his hands clench and release, a tiny, human gesture of helplessness that somehow made him more real than all his supernatural abilities combined. "There's more," Marcus said. "Theron has claimed you, Elena. He's invoked the right of witness, an old law that says any mortal who sees vampire business becomes property of the vampire they witnessed. He's declared you his, legally bound under the Accords." Elena's blood went cold. "What does that mean?" "It means he can hunt you without consequence. No other vampire can offer you protection without challenging his claim directly." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It's a trap. He knows I'll defend you, which gives him legal grounds to call for formal combat. Winner takes all, you, Sierra, and what's left of Corvin's assets. Let me go." Elena's mind raced. "If I'm the bait, remove me from the trap. I'll leave Ashford, disappear, he'll find you." Marcus said it with absolute certainty. "Theron is old, powerful, and patient. He'll track you to the ends of the earth if necessary, simply to draw me out. You became a piece on the board the moment you stepped into that alley. So what are you saying? I'm just supposed to accept being this monster's property?" "No." Marcus finally moved, crossing to stand before her. His pale gray eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "I'm saying I need to think like Dorian would have. He was the strategist. I was always just the weapon." "You're more than that," Elena found herself saying. "I've seen you with Sierra. The way you removed the silver rather than ask me to hurt you. You're not just a weapon." Something flickered in Marcus's expression, surprise perhaps, or something more dangerous. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. He read the new message, and his face went utterly still. "What?" Elena demanded. "One of my people, a contact in House Dante. They're offering sanctuary." Marcus looked up, suspicion clear in his eyes. House Dante has never been friendly to Corvin. This could be genuine aid or an elaborate trap. Why would they help you? The message says they're tired of Theron's ambitions, that he's become too aggressive, too willing to break the old laws for power. Marcus set down the phone. House Dante values stability above all else. If they truly believe Theron threatens the balance, then they might actually mean it, Elena finished. Or they might be working with him to lure you into the open. Precisely. Marcus looked at her with something like respect. You think strategically. I think like someone who's been betrayed before. Elena kept one arm around Sierra, who had gone eerily quiet against her side. What does your gut tell you? Marcus was silent for a long moment, and Elena watched him work through calculations she couldn't begin to understand. Centuries of vampire politics, blood feuds, and shifting alliances. Finally, he spoke. My gut says Dorian would have trusted House Dante before he'd trust running blind. They have resources, safe houses, legal protection under the Accords, political weight. He paused. But my gut also says I'm not Dorian. I'm the blunt instrument he pointed at. Problems. Strategy was never my strength. Then maybe it's time to learn. Elena straightened despite her protesting ribs. What are your options? Really? Marcus began to pace controlled, measured steps that spoke of caged energy. We can run, take Sierra and disappear into the remote territories, live as exiles. We'd be safe, but powerless. Sierra would grow up in hiding, always afraid. Or we fight. Accept House Dany's offer, use their resources to build a base of power. Challenge Theron directly and end this before he consolidates control of Corvin's former territories. Marcus stopped pacing. But that means putting you both at greater risk. It means staying in the game instead of walking away. Sierra finally spoke, her voice small but clear. Papa never walked away from fights. Marcus knelt before her, his expression softening. Your father was brave, little one. Perhaps too brave. That's why he stopped, swallowing whatever he'd been about to say. You're all I have left of him. Keeping you safe matters more than honor or revenge. But she's not safe either way, is she? Elena heard herself ask. Whether you run or fight, Theron will keep hunting. The only question is whether you face him on your terms or his. Marcus looked up at her, and Elena saw the weight of command settling onto shoulders that had only ever followed orders before. The weapon being asked to become the general. The loyal brother forced to step into shoes he'd never wanted to fill. If we do this, he said slowly, if we accept Dany's offer and make a stand, I can't protect you from everything. The vampire world is brutal, Elena. It will chew you up and spit you out without a second thought. So did my engagement, Elena said. So did losing my business and my supposed friends. I'm tougher than I look. I've noticed. Something almost like a smile touched Marcus's lips. Against my better judgment, I've definitely noticed. The phone buzzed a third time. Marcus glanced at it, his expression hardening. Theron's people are searching the warehouse district. They'll reach us within the hour. He looked between Elena and Sierra. So we decide now. Run or fight. Exile or war. Elena met his gaze steadily, feeling the weight of the choice. In the growing daylight, Marcus looked less like a monster and more like a man carrying impossible burdens with quiet dignity. A man who'd just lost his brother, inherited a child, and been thrust into a role he'd never prepared for. What would keep Sierra safest in the long run? Elena asked. Marcus considered the question with visible care. Eliminating Theron. Establishing her right to exist under the protection of a stronger house. Giving her a life, not just survival. Then that's your answer. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a response. When he looked up, his pale gray eyes held something Elena hadn't seen before, determination mixed with something that might have been hope. We accept House Dany's offer, he said. And pray this isn't the mistake that ends us all. Chapter 5. House of Shadows. The drive to House Dany's estate took them through Ashford's wealthiest district, where old money hid behind iron gates and manicured gardens. Marcus had insisted Elena lie down in the back seat with Sierra, both of them covered by a dark blanket protection from prying eyes and, he'd said grimly, easier to shield if they were attacked en route. Beneath the blanket, Sierra's cold hand found Elena's warm one. The child's grip was strong, desperate, and Elena squeezed back, offering what comfort she could to a girl mourning a father while fleeing for her life. The car finally stopped. Elena heard Marcus speak quietly to someone, then the crunch of gravel as they passed through gates that closed with an ominous clang behind them. Only when the car stopped again did Marcus pull back the blanket. "We're here. Stay close to me." Elena emerged to find herself facing a mansion that looked like it had been transplanted from Victorian England, all Gothic spires and leaded windows, surrounded by gardens that seemed too perfectly maintained for the late autumn season. Two figures waited on the front steps, both impossibly beautiful in that way Elena was beginning to recognize as vampire. The woman wore a burgundy dress that looked like it cost more than Elena's entire year's rent. Her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. The man beside her was younger looking, dark-skinned and sharp-eyed, dressed in a suit that screamed old money and older power. "Marcus Corvin," the woman said, her voice carrying a faint Italian accent. "It's been 30 years since you last darkened our doorway. I believe you called my husband a political coward and threatened to burn down our West Wing." Marcus's jaw tightened. Dorian and I had philosophical differences with House Dandy's neutrality policies. But my brother is dead, and I find myself in need of political cowards who know how to survive. The woman's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "Always so charming. I'm Isabella Dante, head of this house since my husband passed 15 years ago. This is my son, Adrian." She gestured to the man beside her. "And you must be the mortal who's caused such an uproar." Elena felt the weight of Isabella's gaze, ancient, calculating, seeing far more than Elena wanted to reveal. "I'm Elena Thorne. I didn't ask to cause an uproar. I just tried to help a child. And now you're bound to Theron by the right of witness," Isabella said. "How refreshingly inconvenient for everyone involved. Can you help her or not?" Marcus moved slightly, positioning himself between Elena and the Dantes. "Your message said you offered sanctuary. We offer a bargain," Adrian corrected, speaking for the first time. His voice was smooth, educated, dangerous. "Sanctuary in exchange for something House Dante needs from House Corvin. House Corvin doesn't exist anymore, but its secrets do." Isabella descended the steps with predatory grace. "Your brother kept meticulous records. Deals, alliances, debts owed across 3 continents. We want those records, Marcus. In exchange, we'll house you, the child, and your mortal pet. We'll even help you challenge Theron's claim legally." Marcus went very still. "Those records would give you leverage over half the houses in Europe." "Precisely," Isabella smiled. "Power for protection. A fair trade." Elena watched Marcus struggle with the decision, saw him weigh his brother's legacy against Sierra's safety. The child pressed closer to Elena's side, her dark eyes fixed on Isabella with unchildlike wariness. "The records are encrypted," Marcus said finally. Only Dorian knew the codes, but he had a failsafe. Isabella's smile widened. He always had failsafes. A man like Dorian Corvin wouldn't let his life's work die with him. "The codes are somewhere, probably with someone he trusted absolutely." Marcus's expression shifted, and Elena saw understanding dawn. "Sierra, the child was born of both worlds," Adrian said. "Dorian would have ensured she could access everything if needed. He was sentimental that way." Sierra stiffened against Elena, and when she spoke, her voice carried an edge that sounded far too much like her late father. "I won't betray Papa's secrets. No one's asking you to betray them, little one," Isabella said, her tone gentling slightly. "We're asking you to use them. Your father built those networks to protect you. Let them serve that purpose." "And if we refuse?" Marcus asked. "Then you leave," Isabella shrugged. "Walk out those gates with no protection, no resources, and Theron hunting you across every city between here and the Mediterranean. See how long you last." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Elena felt Sierra trembling and squeezed her hand, then found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "You said you'd help challenge Theron's claim on me. How?" Isabella's attention shifted, and Elena fought not to flinch under that ancient gaze. "The right of witness is old law, but it has limitations. If another vampire claims you first with your consent, Theron's claim becomes void. You want me to become property of House Dante instead. I want you to become protected by House Dante. There's a difference." "Not much of one," Elena muttered. "More than you think." Adrian moved down the steps. "Theron would drain you dry within a week, then display your corpse as a warning. We would simply invest in your continued well-being. Your leverage against Marcus, after all. Alive, you're useful. Dead, you're merely memorable." The casual cruelty of it stole Elena's breath. This was the vampire world Marcus had warned her about, where human lives were currency and kindness was just another transaction. She looked at Marcus, saw him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "It's your choice," he said quietly. "I won't make it for you." Elena thought about Theron's hand around her throat, the casual violence in his eyes. Then she thought about Syrah's small hand in hers, this strange child who'd already lost so much. The calculation was simple. Really better to be valuable than dead? "If I agree," Elena said slowly, "I want it in writing. Clear terms. No surprises." Isabella's smile turned genuine. "I think I'm going to like you, mortal." "Very well. You'll have your contract. Now shall we discuss terms inside?" "I'd rather not conduct business on the doorstep like common merchants." The mansion's interior was exactly as oppressive as Elena expected. Dark wood paneling, oil paintings of severe-looking ancestors, furniture that probably cost more than her childhood home. Isabella led them to a study lined with books that smelled of age and secrets. Gesturing for them to sit, Syrah refused to leave Elena's side, perching on the arm of her chair like a small protective guardian. Marcus remained standing, his posture military straight, eyes tracking every exit. "The contract is simple," Isabella said, producing papers from a desk drawer with supernatural efficiency. "Elena Thorne consents to house Dandy's protection. In exchange, she provides testimony about Theron's violation of the Accord, specifically his attempt to murder a mortal witness without proper council approval. We file a formal challenge which triggers an investigation. That could take months," Marcus said. "It will take 3 weeks," Adrian corrected. "We've already laid the groundwork with sympathetic council members. Theron's been making enemies. We simply accelerated the timeline." Elena read through the contract, her photographer's eye, catching details others might miss. "This says I'm under House Danny's exclusive patronage for the duration of the dispute. What does that mean?" "It means you live here," Isabella said, "with Marcus and Syrah, protected, fed, housed. In exchange, you appear before the council when summoned and tell the truth about what you witnessed, and after, when the dispute is resolved, then you're free to go. With compensation for your time and trauma." Naturally, Isabella's expression was unreadable. "Unless you choose to stay. Some mortals find our world compelling. Some mortals are idiots," Elena muttered, but she signed the contract anyway. What choice did she have? Isabella countersigned with a flourish, then turned to Marcus. "Now for your end of the bargain. Syrah, dear child, your father left you something very important. We need you to share it with us." Syrah's hand tightened on Elena's shoulder. "Papa said the secrets were dangerous, that they could hurt people." "They can," Marcus agreed, finally sitting. He pulled Syrah onto his lap with gentle firmness. "But they can also protect people. Your father would want them used to keep you safe." The child studied her uncle's face for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "The codes are in the music box. The one Mama gave me before she died." Isabella and Adrian exchanged glances that spoke of satisfaction and calculation. Elena felt a chill run down her spine, wondering what exactly they'd just unleashed. "Where is this music box?" Isabella asked. "In Papa's safe house," Syrah said. "The one by the river. He took me there the night before they hurt him." "Then we retrieve it tonight," Adrian said. "Before Theron's people find it." "Too dangerous," Marcus countered. "They'll be watching every Corvin property, which is why we send someone they won't expect." Isabella's gaze settled on Elena with predatory focus. "Someone mortal. Someone Theron doesn't know to watch for yet." Elena's heart sank. "You want me to walk into a potential death trap. We want you to retrieve a music box from an empty apartment," Isabella corrected smoothly. "Adrian will accompany you. Ensure your safety. It's a simple task." "Nothing in your world is simple." "No," Isabella agreed. "But you signed the contract. And House Dante expects its investments to prove their value." Chapter 6. Blood and Oath's safe house sat in Ashford's oldest district, where centuries-old buildings leaned against each other like weary soldiers. Elena studied the narrow townhouse from across the street, her breath misting in the cold night air. Nothing about it screamed vampire safe house, just another forgotten residence in a neighborhood gentrification had overlooked. "Third floor, corner apartment," Adrian said from beside her. He'd changed into dark clothing that made him nearly invisible in the shadows. Dorian kept it under a shell corporation. Very few people knew it existed, but Theron's people might be among those few, Marcus added grimly. He'd positioned himself on Elena's other side, close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from him. "We go in fast. Get the music box. Get out. No heroics." Wouldn't dream of it, Elena muttered, though her hands were shaking. The camera bag slung over her shoulder felt inadequate as protection she'd insisted on bringing it. Some photographers' instinct that documentation mattered. That bearing witness was its own form of power. They crossed the empty street, and Adrian produced a key that looked older than Elena's grandparents'. The lock turned with a soft click that seemed too loud in the silence. Inside, the building smelled of mold and memories, the narrow stairwell barely wide enough for one person. Marcus went first, moving with predatory silence up the creaking stairs. Elena followed, acutely aware of Adrian behind her, insurance or threat. She couldn't decide which. By the time they reached the third floor, her ribs were screaming and her breath came in short gasps. The apartment door bore scorch marks around the lock. Marcus held up a hand, stopping them. He pressed his ear to the door, inhuman senses straining for any sound within. After a long moment, he shook his head and tried the handle. It opened easily. "Someone's been here," he whispered. The apartment beyond had been ransacked. Furniture overturned, cushions slashed, books torn from shelves and scattered like broken birds. In the center of the chaos, a child's bedroom stood untouched, a small island of preserved innocence amid the destruction. "Sierra's room," Marcus said softly, and Elena heard genuine pain in his voice. "Dorian kept it exactly as her mother left it." Elena stepped inside, her photographer's eye cataloging details, the hand-painted stars on the ceiling, the bookshelf full of fairy tales in multiple languages, the small vanity with a silver music box sitting exactly in the center. "Too easy," Adrian said from the doorway. "They found the room. Why didn't they take the box?" Marcus was already moving toward the vanity when Elena saw it, a thin wire running from the music box to the floorboards beneath. "Stop." Marcus froze mid-step. Elena knelt carefully, tracing the wire with her eyes. It disappeared into a small hole drilled through the antique wood, leading to its rig, she said. "Touch the box, and something bad happens. Probably something very bad. Knowing your world." Adrian crouched beside her, examining the mechanism with professional interest. "Silver explosive. Opens the box wrong, and it detonates. Would take out everyone in the room and most of the building. Clever. Can you disarm it?" Marcus asked, tension radiating from his rigid posture. "I can," Adrian said, "but it will take time. And if Theron's people set this trap, they're probably watching to see who springs it." As if summoned by the words, glass shattered in the front room. Marcus moved faster than Elena could track, positioning himself between her and the sound. Adrian drew a wicked-looking blade from somewhere inside his coat. 3 figures came through the window, 2 men and a woman, all moving with that terrible vampire grace. The woman smiled when she saw Marcus, revealing elongated fangs. "Marcus Corvin," she purred. "Theron sends his regards. And his claim on the mortal woman. Tell Theron he can collect his claim from the council," Marcus said, his voice dropping into something ancient and deadly. "After they finish investigating his violations, the council moves slowly. We move fast." The woman's gaze shifted to Elena. "Come quietly, mortal. Make this easy on yourself. When has anything in your world been easy?" Elena shot back, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. The woman laughed. "I like her. Pity. We have to break her." They attacked as one coordinated unit. Marcus met the first attacker mid-leap, redirecting him into the wall with bone-crushing force. Adrian moved like liquid shadow, his blade finding the second attacker's throat before the man could fully enter the room. The woman went straight for Elena. Elena did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed the music box. The woman stopped dead, her eyes widening. "Don't. One more step and I open it," Elena said, her hands trembling around the delicate mechanism. "I die. You die. Everyone dies. How badly does Theron want me if he has to scrape me off the walls?" The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Marcus was there, his hand closing around the woman's throat, lifting her off the ground with casual strength that made Elena's stomach turn. "You have 5 seconds to call off your people," Marcus said quietly, "or I demonstrate why Dorian kept me around for 2 centuries. The woman made a gesture. The 2 male vampires disengaged, bleeding but still standing. Adrian kept his blade ready, dark blood dripping from the silver edge. "This isn't over," the woman rasped. "Theron will have what's his. Theron can try." Marcus threw her toward the broken window. She caught herself on the frame, shot Elena one last venomous look, then vanished into the night with her companions. The silence after their departure felt crushing. Elena's hands were still wrapped around the music box, and she realized she was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Elena, Marcus approached carefully, like she might shatter. You can put it down now. Can I? Elena looked at the delicate mechanism, at the wire running into the floor. You heard her. This isn't over. Theron will send more. Better. We need what's in this box. Not if it kills you in the process. Then disarm it. Elena met his pale gray eyes. I didn't survive my engagement imploding and tonight's nightmare just to give up now. Get it done. Adrian knelt again, producing tools from inside his coat with practiced efficiency. Hold very still. And if I say run, you run. Understood? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Marcus moved closer. His presence, a cold wall at her back, protective, solid, strangely comforting. Despite everything he was, Adrian worked in silence. His movements precise as a surgeon's. Minutes stretched like hours. Elena's arms began to ache from holding the box so carefully, her cracked ribs grinding with each shallow breath. Sweat ran down her spine, despite the cold radiating from Marcus. Almost there, Adrian murmured. When I cut the final wire, you need to set it down very gently. No sudden movements. Understood, Elena whispered. The wire snapped with a soft ping. Elena placed the music box on the vanity like it was made of spun glass, then stepped back so fast she stumbled into Marcus. His hands steadied her, cold but gentle. And for a moment they stayed like that, her back against his chest, his hands on her shoulders. Both of them breathing hard, despite only one of them needing air. You were incredibly brave, Marcus said softly. And incredibly stupid. Story of my life, Elena managed. Adrian opened the music box carefully. A soft melody played, something old and melancholy that made Elena's throat tighten. Inside, nestled among velvet, was a small USB drive and a folded letter. Marcus reached past Elena to retrieve the letter, and she saw his hands tremble, the first time she'd seen him show such obvious emotion. He unfolded the paper and his expression cracked. It's addressed to Sierra, he said, his voice rough. Dorian's last words to his daughter. What does it say? Elena asked gently. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, reading. When he finally spoke, the words came slowly, weighted with grief. My darling girl, if you're reading this, I have failed you. But your uncle will not. Trust Marcus. He is stronger than he believes, kinder than he allows himself to show. The codes on this drive contain everything I built, every alliance, every secret, every debt. Use them to build a better world than the one I'm leaving you. A world where vampire children don't grow up knowing only violence and loss. I love you. I'm sorry. Be brave, my little star. Your mother and I will watch over you always. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of sirens, the mortal world. Continuing on, unaware of the grief being carried in a vampire's hands. We should go, Adrian said quietly. Before more of Theron's people arrive, Marcus folded the letter with reverent care, tucking it safely into his coat along with the USB drive. When he turned to Elena, she saw something new in his pale gray eyes, not just protectiveness or obligation, but genuine gratitude. Thank you, he said, for risking yourself, for Sierra, for all of this. Thank me when we survive, Elena said, but she managed a small smile. Come on, let's get that letter to its rightful owner. They left the apartment in ruins, its secrets finally claimed. Behind them, the city sprawled in darkness, full of hunters and hunted, predators and prey, and somewhere in that dangerous night, a grieving vampire lord plotting his next move. Elena followed Marcus down the stairs, Adrian guarding their rear, and thought about music boxes and last letters. About the terrible love that drove parents to build empires just to protect their children. She thought about bravery and stupidity, and how sometimes they were the same thing. Chapter 7. When shadows striketh, the attack came 3 nights later. Just when Elena had started to believe House Dandy's walls might actually keep them safe, she'd spent those 3 days in a strange limbo, housed in a guest room that was larger than her entire former apartment. Fed meals prepared by staff who moved with the too perfect grace of vampires, watched constantly by guards who never seemed to blink. Sierra had attached herself to Elena like a shadow, following her from room to room, seeking comfort in the only person who felt remotely human in this cold marble world. Marcus had been absent most of the time, locked in meetings with Isabella and her advisors, poring over Dorian's encrypted files. The few times Elena saw him, He looked exhausted in a way she hadn't thought vampires could be, the weight of his brother's legacy pressing down on shoulders that had never wanted to lead. Now it was past midnight, and Elena sat in the mansion's library, with Sierra curled against her side, reading aloud from a collection of fairy tales. The child had been having nightmares, waking screams that brought guards running and left her shaking for hours. Stories helped, Marcus had said. They reminded her of her mother. Elena had just reached the part where the princess kisses the frog when every light in the mansion went out. The darkness was absolute, suffocating. Sierra's hand clamped onto Elena's arm with bruising force, and Elena heard the child's breath quicken with panic. "It's okay," Elena whispered, though her own heart was hammering. Probably just the power. The windows exploded inward. Glass showered across the library floor, glittering like deadly stars in the moonlight. Figures poured through the broken windows, 5, 6, 7 of them, moving with predatory coordination. Elena grabbed Sierra and dove behind a heavy reading table just as the first attacker reached where they'd been sitting. "Find the child," a voice shouted, Theron's voice, unmistakable in its cultured cruelty. "And bring me the mortal woman alive. She and I have unfinished business." Sierra was trembling violently, her small body rigid with terror. Elena pulled the child closer, pressing them both against the table's solid bulk, mind racing. She had no weapons, no supernatural strength, nothing but her camera bag and a 9-year-old vampire who was currently too terrified to remember she was supposed to be dangerous. Footsteps crunched across broken glass, coming closer. Elena's hand found her camera bag, fingers closing around the heavy flash unit inside. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. "Come out, little mortal," Theron called, his voice silky with anticipated violence. "I promise to make it quick." Well, relatively quick. The table suddenly lifted off the floor, torn away by inhuman strength. Theron stood above them, smiling that terrible smile, his eyes reflecting the moonlight like a predator's. He reached for Elena and Marcus slammed into him from the side. They hit the floor in a tangle of violence, Marcus's fist connecting with Theron's jaw hard enough to crack bone. More vampires poured into the library house, Donde guards, their faces grim, moving to engage Theron's people in brutal close combat. "Elena, run," Marcus shouted, blocking a strike that would have taken his head off. "Get Sierra out, go." Elena grabbed Sierra's hand and ran. Behind them, the library erupted into chaos, the sound of breaking furniture, inhuman snarls, the wet crunch of bodies being thrown through walls. They burst into the hallway to find more fighting, Isabella directing her guards with cold precision, Adrian cutting through attackers with that wicked blade. "The East Wing," Isabella shouted when she saw them. "The safe room, go." Elena had no idea where the East Wing was, but she ran anyway, Sierra's cold hand clutched in hers. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with one of Theron's people, a woman with blood-red lips and eyes that held nothing human. The woman's hand shot out, catching Elena by the throat and slamming her against the wall. Pain exploded through her barely healed ribs, and she felt something crack. The camera bag slipped from her shoulder, hitting the floor with an expensive crunch. "Such a fuss over one little mortal," the woman purred, her grip tightening. "What makes you so special?" Sierra moved. The child was suddenly there, small hands gripping the woman's arm, and Elena saw the vampire's expression shift from cruel amusement to shock. Sierra's eyes had gone completely black, and when she spoke, her voice carried an otherworldly resonance that made Elena's skin crawl. "Let her go." Power rolled off the child in waves, raw, uncontrolled, terrifying. The woman screamed and released Elena, clutching her arm where Sierra had touched her. The flesh was smoking, blistering, as if burned by acid. "You're the woman," gasped. "You're a daywalker." Sierra's small face twisted with rage and grief and something far too old for her years. "I said go." The power exploded outward. Elena felt it wash over her like cold fire, felt it slam into the vampire woman and send her flying backward through a window. The sound of her impact was followed by silence. Sierra swayed, her eyes rolling back. Elena caught her before she hit the floor. The child's small body suddenly burning hot instead of cold, a fever that no human could survive. "No, no, no," Elena whispered, cradling Sierra against her chest. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Stay with me." Footsteps pounded down the hallway. Marcus appeared, blood not his own splattered across his face and clothes. His eyes found Sierra in Elena's arms and went wide with horror. "What happened?" "She used her power," Elena said, "to save me. Now she's burning up." Marcus, She's burning. Marcus dropped to his knees beside them, his hands hovering over Sierra with uncharacteristic helplessness. Daywalker manifestation. It happens when they're stressed, but she's so young. His voice cracked. This could kill her. Then fix it. Elena snapped. You're her uncle. You're supposed to protect her. I don't know how. The admission tore out of Marcus like a confession. Dorian always handled this. He knew what to do when her power manifested. I'm just the weapon, Elena. I break things. I don't know how to heal them. More footsteps. Isabella appeared, her silver hair disheveled, her elegant dress torn. She took one look at Sierra, and her expression went carefully blank. Blood bond, she said. It's the only way to stabilize a daywalker manifestation this severe. What does that mean? Elena demanded. It means someone has to share their blood with her. Create a temporary link to anchor her power. Isabella's gaze fixed on Marcus. It should be you. Your family. The bond will be stronger. Marcus had gone very still. A blood bond isn't temporary, Isabella. You know that. Once formed, you'll be linked to her for life. You'll feel her emotions, sense her danger, be bound to protect her above all others. Isabella's voice was flat. It's why Dorian never bonded with her. He knew it would make her a permanent target, a weakness his enemies could exploit. And now those enemies are at our gates, Marcus said bitterly. He looked down at Sierra, unconscious and burning in Elena's arms, and Elena saw him make the choice in real time. Tell me what to do. Isabella knelt beside them, producing a silver knife from somewhere. Your blood in her mouth, her blood in yours. Speak the words of binding. The rest happens on its own. Wait, Elena interrupted. What does this cost him? Really? Everything, Isabella said simply. A blood bond is permanent, unbreakable. If she dies, he dies. If he strays too far from her, both of them weaken. He'll feel every hurt she suffers, carry every burden she bears. It's the deepest commitment a vampire can make, deeper than marriage, deeper than turning someone. It's essentially slavery to another's well-being. Marcus took the knife without hesitation. She's Dorian's daughter, my niece, my responsibility. He met Elena's eyes. And she saved you. That matters. He cut his palm, then gently opened Sierra's mouth and let his blood drip onto her tongue. The child stirred, instinct making her swallow. Marcus then carefully pricked her finger, bringing the small drop of blood to his own lips. The moment his mouth closed around her finger, power exploded through the hallway. Elena felt it like pressure in her ears, saw it like heat shimmer in the air. Marcus's eyes went wide, then rolled back as he gasped. Sierra arched in Elena's arms, a cry tearing from her small throat. The fever burned hotter, then suddenly broke, leaving the child cold and still. For one terrible moment, Elena thought they were both dead. Then Sierra's eyes opened normal now, dark and human. She looked up at Marcus, who was kneeling beside them, with an expression of wonder and terror mixed equally on his face. Uncle? She whispered. I'm here, Marcus said hoarsely. I've got you. I'll always have you now. Sierra reached for him, and Marcus gathered her into his arms, holding her with a tenderness that made Elena's throat tight. Over the child's head, his pale gray eyes met Elena's, and she saw everything he'd just sacrificed written there: freedom, safety, the ability to walk away from danger when wisdom dictated. He'd chosen slavery to a child's well-being over his own survival, and somehow, that choice made him more human than anything else Elena had witnessed. They're retreating, Adrian announced, appearing in the doorway. Theron pulled back when he realized we'd activated the mansion's defenses. He left a message though. What message? Isabella demanded. Adrian's expression was grim. He's challenged Marcus formally. Trial by combat in 3 nights, before the full council. Winner takes everything: Corvin's territories, the child, and the mortal woman. Loser faces final death. Marcus didn't look surprised. I accept. Marcus, Isabella began. Chapter 8. The weight of choice. This morning after the attack found Elena in the mansion's conservatory, staring at her reflection in the frost-covered windows. Her ribs were wrapped tight, another crack to add to her collection, and bruises bloomed across her throat in the shape of fingers. She looked like someone who'd survived a war, which she supposed wasn't far from the truth. You should be resting. Elena turned to find Marcus in the doorway, Sierra sleeping against his shoulder. The blood bond had changed something fundamental in him. He moved differently now, as if half his attention was always turned inward, monitoring the child's heartbeat, her dreams, her needs. It looked exhausting. Couldn't sleep, Elena said. Every time I close my eyes, I see that woman's hand around my throat. Or Sierra collapsing. Or you." She stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. "Me what?" Marcus moved closer, settling Sierra carefully onto a cushioned bench without waking her. "You, making impossible choices and acting like they cost you nothing." Elena's voice came out sharper than intended. "A blood bond, Marcus," Isabella said. "It's essentially slavery. It's protection." Marcus's jaw tightened. Sierra needed an anchor. "I provided one. You gave up your freedom." "I gave up the illusion of freedom." He met her gaze steadily. "I was never free, Elena. The moment Dorian died, the moment I saw Sierra in that courtyard, I was bound. The blood bond just made it official." Elena wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in his eyes stopped her. He looked ancient in that moment, carrying the weight of centuries. She couldn't begin to comprehend. She found herself moving closer, reaching out to touch his arm before she could think better of it. "You didn't have to," she said softly. "She's not your responsibility. She's my brother's daughter. That makes her mine." Marcus didn't pull away from her touch, which surprised them both. "Besides, she saved you. That earns loyalty. Is that all this is? Loyalty?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to explore. Marcus's gaze dropped to where Elena's hand rested on his sleeve, then back to her face. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've spent 2 centuries being what Dorian needed me to be: weapon, protector, executioner. I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else. Maybe that's your chance to find out." Elena squeezed his arm gently. "You keep calling yourself a weapon, but weapons don't make the choices you've made. Weapons don't sacrifice themselves for children or strangers." Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a crack in the stone facade. "You're not a stranger anymore." "No," Elena agreed. "I suppose I'm not." The moment stretched, intimate and dangerous. Elena was acutely aware of how close they stood, of the cold radiating from his body, of the way his pale gray eyes traced her features like he was memorizing them. She should step back, create distance, remember that he was a vampire and she was mortal, and nothing good could come from Marcus. Isabella's voice shattered the moment like breaking glass. She stood in the conservatory entrance, her expression unreadable. "The council has confirmed the trial. 3 nights from now, as Theron demanded." Marcus turned, his body shifting into warrior stillness. "Terms? Standard combat rules. Silver weapons permitted, but no outside interference. Fight continues until one party yields or dies." Isabella's gaze flicked to Elena. "The mortal's status will be determined by the outcome. If you win, Theron's claim is voided. If I lose, she becomes his property." Marcus finished flatly. "Understood. There's more." Isabella moved into the conservatory, her movements predatory despite her elegant dress. "Theron has been gathering allies. 5 other houses have pledged support to his claim. They see this as an opportunity to absorb Corvin's territories permanently. Let them come." Marcus's voice held no fear, only grim determination. "I'll face them all if necessary. That's the problem." Isabella's careful composure cracked slightly. "You can't fight them all, Marcus. Even you have limits. We need leverage, something that makes the other houses reconsider their support." "The files," Elena said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. "Dorian's records. You said they contain secrets, debts, leverage over half the houses in Europe. Use them." "We've been trying," Isabella said, "but the encryption is more complex than we anticipated. Sierra has the codes, but she glanced at the sleeping child. She's too traumatized to access the memories clearly. Dorian hid the information in her mind, but grief is blocking her recall." Elena looked at Sierra's small, peaceful face and felt her heart clench. "Because she saw her father die. Because she watched him die slowly," Marcus corrected, his voice rough. "Silver poisoning takes hours. Dorian used that time to download everything into Sierra's mind, every secret, every alliance, every piece of leverage he'd accumulated in 3 centuries. Then he made her promise to give it only to me, only when she was safe. But she doesn't feel safe," Elena realized. "Even here, even with you bonded to her, she still feels hunted. Can you blame her?" Marcus turned back to the frost-covered windows. "She's 9 years old. She's lost her father, her home, her entire world. Safety must feel like a fairy tale." Elena thought about fairy tales, about the book she'd been reading to Sierra the night before, about how stories helped children process trauma, gave them frameworks for understanding the incomprehensible. What if we gave her a different story? Elena said slowly. Isabella frowned. Explain. Sierra's traumatized because she feels helpless, hunted. But what if, instead of waiting for the trial, we make her part of the solution? Elena moved to the bench, kneeling beside the sleeping child. What if we help her understand that her father's gift these memories, these codes, they're not just data. They're weapons. And she can choose how to use them. You want to weaponize a 9-year-old? Isabella's tone was sharp. I want to give her agency, Elena corrected. The difference matters. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him working through the implications. Finally, he nodded slowly. It could work. Sierra's been trained to obey, to hide, to be protected. But Dorian also raised her to think strategically. He looked at Elena with something like wonder. You're suggesting we treat her like the heir she actually is. I'm suggesting we let her choose to help us, instead of forcing her. Elena stroked Sierra's hair gently. Children aren't stupid, Marcus. They know when they're being used. But they also respond to being trusted. And if it traumatizes her further, then we stop. Elena met his gaze steadily. But I don't think it will. I think she needs to feel like she has power in a situation where she's felt powerless. Isabella considered this, her ancient eyes calculating. If the child can access even half of Dorian's files, we'd have enough leverage to fracture Theron's support. Several houses owe Corvin debts they'd rather not acknowledge publicly. Then we try Elena's way. Marcus knelt beside them, his hand finding Sierra's small one. The blood bond pulsed visibly, a faint shimmer in the air between them. But carefully. We don't push. Sierra stirred, her eyes opening. She looked confused for a moment, then focused on Marcus with the immediate awareness of someone who'd learned to assess threats before fully waking. Uncle? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, little one. Marcus helped her sit up. But we need to talk about your father's gift. The codes he gave you. Sierra's expression closed down immediately. Papa said not to tell anyone. He said they were dangerous. They are dangerous, Elena agreed, drawing the child's attention. But dangerous things can also be protective. Like guard dogs. They're scary, but they keep you safe. Sierra studied Elena with those tooled eyes. You're trying to trick me. No, Elena shook her head. I'm trying to give you a choice. Your uncle is going to fight Theron in 3 days. If he wins, you're safe. If he loses, he dies. Sierra finished flatly. And I become property. The blunt assessment made Marcus flinch, but Elena pressed on. Yes, unless we can convince Theron's allies to abandon him. And the only way to do that is with the information your father left you. But Papa said your papa also said to trust your uncle. Marcus interrupted gently. And I'm saying we need your help, Sierra. Not as a child to be protected, but as the heir to House Corvin. As Dorian's daughter. Sierra looked between them, her small face grave. Elena held her breath, watching the child wrestle with impossible choices, safety versus power, obedience versus action. What would I have to do? Sierra asked finally. Remember, Marcus said simply. Your father put the codes in your mind. We need you to access them. Give them to us. Then we use them to protect you. Will it hurt? Remembering might hurt, Elena admitted. But we'll be right here with you. You won't be alone. Sierra was quiet for a long moment. Then she straightened her small shoulders, a gesture so like her father that Marcus made a soft sound of grief and nodded once. Okay, she said. I'll try. For Papa. And for Uncle Marcus. Her gaze shifted to Elena, and something shifted in her expression. And for you. Because you stayed even when you didn't have to. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Then let's get started. We have 3 days to change the world. Isabella moved toward the door. I'll prepare the study. Bring her when she's ready. As she left, Marcus caught Elena's hand. Thank you, he said quietly, for seeing what I couldn't, for giving her a choice. Someone recently gave me one, Elena said. Seemed only fair to pay it forward. Chapter 9. Lessons in the dark. The study Isabella had prepared looked more like an interrogation room than a place for a child to recover traumatic memories. Harsh lights, recording equipment, Adrian standing guard by the door with that wicked blade visible at his hip. Elena took one look and shook her head. No, she said firmly. This won't work. Isabella raised an eyebrow. The equipment is necessary to document she's 9 years old, not a defendant. Elena positioned herself between Sierra and the setup. You want her to access buried memories? Then make this feel safe, not like she's on trial. Marcus studied the room, then nodded slowly. Elena's right. Sierra, where would you feel most comfortable? The child clutched her uncle's hand, her eyes scanning the mansion's vast interior with visible anxiety. Finally, she pointed toward the conservatory where they'd been earlier. There, with the plants. Mama used to have a garden. 20 minutes later, they'd relocated to the conservatory. Isabella had grudgingly allowed softer lighting, and Elena had arranged cushions into a nest on the floor where Sierra could curl up comfortably. Adrian remained on guard, but at a distance that felt protective rather than threatening. Marcus sat cross-legged beside Sierra, the blood bond between them visible as a faint shimmer whenever the child grew anxious. Elena settled on Sierra's other side, close enough to offer comfort, but not crowding. Whenever you're ready, Marcus said gently. No pressure. We have time. 2 days, Isabella corrected from her position near the windows. We have 2 days before the trial. Marcus shot her a quelling look. We have time, he repeated to Sierra. The child took a shaky breath. Papa made me practice. He said someday I might need to remember, and it would be important. Her small hands twisted together. But when I try to think about it, all I see is she stopped, her breathing quickening. Marcus's hand found hers immediately, and Elena watched the bond pulse, sending calm through their connection. What do you see? Elena asked softly. Blood. Papa bleeding. The silver burning him. Sierra's voice dropped to a whisper. He was in so much pain. But he kept talking, kept making me repeat things. Numbers and names and places. I just wanted him to stop, to rest. But he said, her voice broke. He said I had to be brave. Like Mama was brave. Elena's throat tightened. She glanced at Marcus and saw grief etched into his features, grief he'd been holding back for days, contained behind stone walls. Your mother was very brave, Marcus said quietly. She chose to have you, even knowing it might kill her, because you were worth any risk. Did you know her? Sierra asked. Briefly. She was incandescent. That's the word Dorian used. Like captured sunlight. Marcus managed a small, sad smile. She made your father laugh. I'd never seen him laugh before she came along. Sierra absorbed this, some of the tension leaving her small frame. Tell me about them. Together. Happy things. It was a delaying tactic, but Elena recognized it as necessary. Before Sierra could dive into trauma, she needed to remember her father as more than a dying man passing on desperate secrets. Marcus seemed to understand this too. He settled more comfortably, still holding Sierra's hand, and began to speak. Your father was insufferably proper when I first met him. 200 years old, and already acting like he'd invented dignity. There was affection beneath the words. He turned me during the revolution, saved me from the guillotine, though sometimes I wondered if he regretted that choice. I was wild, angry, everything. He wasn't. Why did he turn you? Elena asked, drawn into the story despite herself. He said he saw something worth saving. Potential, he called it. Marcus's expression softened with memory. Took him a century to civilize me. And then your mother arrived, Sierra, and suddenly the great Dorian Corvin was writing poetry at midnight and dancing in gardens. She made him young again. Papa danced? Sierra's eyes widened, terribly, Marcus confirmed. But your mother didn't care. She said his heart was beautiful, even if his feet weren't. Sierra almost smiled, the first real smile Elena had seen from her. The child relaxed further, and Elena saw the strategy in Marcus's approach. Give her good memories first. Ground her in love before asking her to revisit loss. What else? Sierra prompted. Marcus told stories, some funny, some tender, painting a picture of the brother he'd lost and the woman who'd changed everything. Elena watched his face as he spoke, seeing past the vampire to the man beneath. The loyal brother. The uncle who'd give anything to protect the last piece of family he had left. Eventually, Sierra's breathing evened, and some light returned to her dark eyes. She squeezed Marcus's hand. I'm ready now, she said, to remember what Papa told me. Are you sure? Marcus asked. Sierra nodded. He gave me those memories because he trusted me to keep them safe. Now I have to trust Uncle Marcus and Elena and even scary Isabella to use them right. Isabella's lips twitched, the closest thing to a smile Elena had seen from her. I suppose I can live with scary Isabella. Sierra closed her eyes, her small face scrunching with concentration. The blood bond between her and Marcus flared brighter, and Elena saw Marcus stiffen as if experiencing something painful. His free hand clenched into a fist, knuckles going white. What's happening? Elena whispered to Isabella. The bond allows him to share what she's experiencing. He's reliving her father's death alongside her. Isabella's expression was unreadable. It will hurt him, probably quite badly, but it will also help anchor her through the trauma. Elena watched Marcus's face contort with grief and agony. Watched him fight to stay present for Sierra, even as the bond dragged him through her worst memories. Without thinking, she reached out and took his free hand, offering the only thing she could: human warmth, human connection. A reminder that he wasn't alone in the darkness. Marcus's fingers closed around hers with desperate strength, and his pale gray eyes opened briefly, finding hers. "Thank you," they seemed to say. Then he closed them again and dove deeper into Sierra's pain. "The accounts," Sierra said, her voice distant, mechanical, reciting what her father had programmed into her mind. "Zurich Bank, account 773-94. Password, Catherine Starr. That's Mama's name, Catherine." Adrian had moved closer, recording everything on a tablet. Isabella listened with predatory focus, already calculating how to weaponize each revelation. House Moreau's Corvin, 12 million euros. Blood debt for silver smuggling in 1987. House Laurent. Uncle Marcus knows about House Laurent. Papa said so. They killed the girl in Prague. Papa covered it up. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "I remember." The information poured out of Sierra in waves: financial records, political secrets, crimes covered up, and debts owed. Each house Theron had recruited to his cause was revealed to have their own skeletons, their own vulnerabilities. Dorian had been meticulous, collecting leverage the way some people collected art. 20 minutes in, Sierra began to tremble. Marcus opened his eyes, meeting Elena's gaze with visible concern. "She's reaching her limit," he said quietly. "Just a bit more," Isabella urged. "We need the information on House Orsini. They're Theron's strongest ally," Sierra whimpered, and the bond between her and Marcus crackled with shared distress. Elena saw Marcus struggling with the choice: push the child further for strategic advantage, or protect her from additional trauma. "Stop," Elena said firmly, speaking directly to Isabella. "She's done enough. The information isn't worth breaking her." Elena's voice was steel. "You got your leverage. The rest can wait." Isabella looked ready to argue, but Marcus cut her off. "Elena's right. We stop now." He gathered Sierra into his arms, and the child collapsed against him, exhausted and shaking. The bond between them pulsed erratically, both of them struggling with the weight of what they'd just relived. "Did I do good, Uncle?" Sierra whispered. "You did perfect, little one." Marcus held her close, his own hands trembling slightly. "Your father would be so proud. I miss him." "I know. I miss him too." They sat like that for a long moment, vampire and child, bound by blood and grief, holding each other through the darkness. Elena felt like an intruder witnessing something too private, but when she moved to give them space, Marcus's hand shot out and caught hers again. "Stay," he said quietly. "Please." So Elena stayed, her hand in his, while Sierra cried for a father who'd sacrificed everything to protect her. And Marcus grieved for a brother he'd never truly appreciated until he was gone. Isabella and Adrian withdrew, giving them privacy. Outside, night was falling again, another day closer to the trial, to violence, to the moment when Marcus would have to fight for all their lives. But for now, in the quiet conservatory, surrounded by Isabella's perfectly maintained plants, they existed in a pocket of stillness. 3 people to vampires and 1 mortal, connected by choices none of them had planned to make. "Thank you," Marcus said eventually, looking at Elena with red-rimmed eyes. "For knowing when to stop. For protecting her when I couldn't. You protected her where it mattered," Elena said. "You shared her pain so she didn't have to face it alone. That's what family does." Marcus studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're remarkable, Elena Thorne. Brave and foolish, and somehow exactly what we needed." High praise from a vampire, Elena managed, though her voice came out shakier than she intended. "From this vampire," Marcus corrected softly. "It matters." Chapter 10. Trial by Blood. The council chamber was older than Ashford itself, a circular stone room buried beneath the city's oldest cathedral, where vampire law had been adjudicated for 5 centuries. Elena stood in the gallery with Sierra pressed against her side, watching as the council members took their seats on the raised dais. 7 vampires, each representing a different house, each ancient enough to make Marcus look young. Isabella sat among them, her face a mask of political neutrality. She'd spent the last 2 days dismantling Theron's coalition with surgical precision, using Syrah's information to remind several houses why loyalty to a power-hungry upstart was unwise. 3 of Theron's allies had withdrawn their support. 2 remained uncommitted, but one house, Orsini, still stood firmly behind him. Theron entered from the opposite side of the chamber, flanked by guards wearing Orsini's crimson insignia. He looked magnificent in tailored black, every inch the aristocratic predator, his smile sharp enough to cut. When his eyes found Elena in the gallery, his expression promised violence wrapped in politeness. "Elena Thorne," he purred, projecting his voice across the chamber. "How lovely to see you again. After tonight, we'll have so much time to become better acquainted." Syrah's hand tightened on Elena's, and Elena forced herself to meet Theron's gaze without flinching. "After tonight, you'll be ash and memory." Several council members shifted with what might have been amusement. Theron's smile widened. "Such spirit. I do enjoy breaking spirits." Marcus entered last, alone and unarmed, except for the silver blade at his hip, the same one Adrian had used to kill Theron's people at the safe house. He wore simple black, no decoration, no pretense. He looked like what he was, a weapon preparing for deployment, but when his eyes found Elena's across the chamber, something shifted in his expression. Not softness exactly, but recognition, acknowledgement of what stood between them unspoken. Dangerous, impossible to ignore. The head of the council, an ancient vampire named Constantine, raised his hand for silence. "We convened to settle the matter of House Corvin's dissolution and the disposition of properties claimed under the right of witness." His voice carried the weight of centuries. "Marcus Corvin, do you contest Theron Blackwood's claim?" "I do," Marcus said clearly, "on grounds that Theron violated the accords by attempting to murder a witness without council approval, and by attacking a neutral house offering sanctuary. These are serious charges," Constantine acknowledged. "Do you have evidence?" Adrian stepped forward, presenting documentation, photographs Elena had taken of the damage to House Dante, testimony from Isabella's guards, even medical records of Elena's injuries. The council reviewed everything with methodical care. Theron's expression never wavered. "I acted within my rights. The mortal witnessed vampire business. She became mine to dispose of as I saw fit, after proper council review," Isabella interjected smoothly, "which you bypassed entirely. Rather convenient that you claimed her immediately after learning she could testify against your assassination of Dorian Corvin." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Theron's smile finally cracked. "Careful, Isabella. Accusations of that magnitude require proof, which we have," Isabella gestured. And screens descended, displaying financial records, Theron's accounts, showing payment to the vampire who'd poisoned Dorian. "Your assassin kept excellent records." "Foolish but excellent." Theron's face went cold. "Those records are fabricated. The blockchain doesn't lie," Adrian said, appearing at Isabella's side. "Cryptocurrency transactions are remarkably traceable when you know where to look." Elena watched Theron's carefully constructed facade crumble, revealing the predator beneath. His hands clenched, and she saw him calculating odds, measuring threats, deciding whether to fight or flee. He chose fight. "Fine," Theron snarled. "I killed Dorian Corvin." The old fool was weak, allowing human sentiment to contaminate our bloodlines. "His half-breed daughter is an abomination that should never have existed." His gaze swept the council. "I did what none of you had the courage to do. I removed a threat to our way of life. You murdered my brother," Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. "You tortured him for hours. Made his daughter watch. I made an example." Theron's eyes glittered with malice. "Just as I'll make an example of you, Marcus. The loyal dog, following orders without question. What will you do now that your master is dead? Who will tell you what to think?" Marcus moved so fast, Elena barely saw it. One moment he stood 20 feet away. The next, his hand was around Theron's throat, slamming him against the stone wall hard enough to crack it. "I think," Marcus said softly, "that I'm going to kill you slowly." "Order." Constantine's voice cracked like thunder. "Marcus Corvin, stand down." Marcus held Theron for 3 more seconds, long enough to make his point, then released him and stepped back. Theron straightened his jacket, but Elena saw fear flicker across his face for the first time. "The trial will proceed," Constantine declared. "Standard combat rules. Silver weapons permitted. Fight continues until yield or final death." He paused, his ancient gaze moving between the combatants. But let it be known the council finds Theron Blackwood's actions reckless and his justifications insufficient. Regardless of outcome, House Orsini's support is noted and will be remembered. The Orsini representative shifted uncomfortably. Political threats, Elena realized. The council was already distancing themselves from Theron's cause. The chamber floor cleared, creating an arena. Marcus and Theron circled each other like wolves, and Elena felt Sierra tremble against her side. Uncle Marcus is strong, Sierra whispered, but it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. The bond makes him stronger, right? Right, Elena agreed, though she had no idea if that was true. The fight began without ceremony. Theron struck first, a blur of supernatural speed that should have taken Marcus's head off. But Marcus wasn't where he'd been. He'd moved, twisted, brought his blade up in an arc that opened Theron's shoulder. Dark blood sprayed across pale stone. They separated, circled again. Theron's smile was gone now, replaced by cold calculation. You've improved, he said. Dorian trained you well. Dorian taught me patience, Marcus corrected. You're about to learn the difference between a weapon and a soldier. They clashed again. And this time, the violence was sustained, a brutal exchange of strikes and counters that happened too fast for Elena's human eyes to fully track. She saw impact, blood, the flash of silver blades, heard the crack of bone, the hiss of pain. Marcus was faster than she'd seen him before. But Theron was older, more experienced. He fought dirty, going for eyes, throat, joints, using his environment, slamming Marcus into walls, trying to break bones that would heal but would slow him down. But Marcus fought with something Theron didn't have, purpose beyond pride. Elena saw it in every strike, every defense. Marcus wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting for Sierra, for Elena, for his brother's memory and the future that had been stolen from a child who deserved better than a world built on blood and fear. The blood bond flared between Marcus and Sierra, and Elena felt the child stiffen. He's hurt, Sierra whispered. Silver in his side. I can feel it burning. Elena looked closer and saw the wounded deep gash below Marcus's ribs, the edges blackening with silver poisoning. Theron had landed a critical hit. Marcus. Elena shouted before she could stop herself. Both fighters paused. Theron smiled. Ah yes, the mortal. I'd almost forgotten my prize. He turned slightly, addressing Elena directly. Tell me, Marcus, is she worth dying for? This fragile human who stumbled into our world by accident? Marcus didn't look at Elena. He kept his eyes on Theron. But when he spoke, the words carried across the chamber. She's worth living for. There's a difference. Then he moved not toward Theron, but away, creating distance. His hand went to the wound, and Elena watched in horror as he dug his fingers into his own flesh, searching for the silver fragment. Theron attacked while Marcus was distracted, but Marcus had anticipated it. He caught Theron's wrist mid-strike, twisted, and used the momentum to flip Theron over his shoulder. The older vampire hit the ground hard, and Marcus's boot came down on his sword arm, breaking it with an audible snap. Theron screamed. Marcus pulled the silver from his wound with a wet sound that made Elena's stomach turn. The flesh immediately began healing, knitting together with supernatural speed. He dropped the fragment and placed his blade against Theron's throat. Yield, Marcus said quietly. Never. Theron spat blood. Kill me, or I'll hunt you forever. Then I'll make it quick. Marcus raised the blade. More mercy than you showed my brother. Wait. The voice came from the Orsini representative. The vampire stood, his face pale. House Orsini withdraws support. We were misled about the circumstances of Dorian Corvin's death. He looked at Constantine. We petitioned the council to show mercy. Let Theron yield and face exile rather than final death. Constantine considered this. Marcus Corvin, the choice is yours. You have won the trial. Theron's claim is void. Will you take his life or accept his exile? Marcus looked up at the gallery, his eyes finding Elena's. She saw the question there. What did she want? What did mercy look like in a world built on violence? Elena thought about Sierra, about the cycle of revenge and blood that had shaped her young life. She thought about the kind of world they wanted to build, one where vampire children didn't grow up watching their parents die. She nodded once. Mercy. Marcus lowered his blade. Exile. But if I ever see you again, Theron, in any city, any territory, any shadow, I'll finish this. Theron's face twisted with rage and humiliation, but he managed a jerky nod. Guards moved forward to escort him from the chamber, and Elena felt something loosen in her chest. It was over. Marcus crossed to the gallery, and Sierra broke free from Elena's grip to run to him. He caught her, holding her close, and the blood bond between them flared bright with relief and love. You won, Sierra whispered. You saved us. We saved each other, Marcus corrected. He looked at Elena over Sierra's head. All of us. Constantine's voice rang out one final time. The council finds in favor of Marcus Corvin. House Corvin's dissolution is reversed. All territories, assets, and claims are restored. The mortal Elena Thorne is declared free of all bindings. This matter is closed. Elena felt the weight of supernatural law lift from her shoulders, a sensation she hadn't realized she was carrying until it was gone. She was free. Truly free. So why did it feel like losing something precious?